Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Shake Sales. Today I got Sydney Senior, AE at Deal, but also a lot of other stuff going on. Sydney, welcome, and would you mind introducing the podcast and stuff, what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. This is actually my first podcast guest appearance, so very excited about it. So I do also host a podcast called Happily Ambitious. It's really focused on, I think most of our target audience is Saas sales professionals, but especially ones who are looking to find more balance between the ambitious career that we've chosen and also being able to enjoy your day-to-day lives and not be kind of overcome by stress. So trying to put a lot of those learnings into my current role as an AE at Deal, and excited to chat a bit more about that today.
Awesome. So one of the things I feel like really almost any professional has, but more specifically in sales, because you're getting rejected and there's just a whole lot more like negative that happens in your day. You have to like work on finding the positives. Um, how do you deal with kind of the emotions, the ups and downs in your in a sales career or your career specifically?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is going to sound super cliched, but it really is about focusing on what you can control. I think back to when I first started as an SDR a few years back and how much trouble I'd have going from an up month to a down month. And that would just dictate all of my emotion and the rest of my life, not just in my job and my day-to-day workload. It's like after work, I would take that on as like, if I had a bad month, then I'm failing as a person, then I shouldn't feel happy, all of that. And I think a lot of us fall into that trap. And so I think a combination of time, kind of expanding my time horizon instead of thinking like, okay, the only thing that matters is right now this month. And if I don't hit my number this month, then I failed versus how can I sustainably build the skills for a really effective long-term career? Like actually thinking a little bit longer into the future than right this very moment. Because I think that gives us the motivation to actually build skills that will impact us in the long run. So when I say focusing on what you can control, for me, that looks like making sure I have some structure in my day, a minimum number of requirements I've set for myself each day. So for me, I'm kind of focusing on a certain amount of outbound, a certain amount of independent skill development, watching gong calls, refining my own talk tracks and trying to have kind of a checklist of the number of things I'm going to do each day so that no matter what's happening with the deals I'm running, with whatever is happening, maybe inbound has slowed down a little bit, or your key decision maker went on vacation for a month and didn't want to get back to you. As long as you're hitting those metrics you set for yourself each day and you're taking ownership over your progression, I think that helps a lot with the mindset of like, you're doing what you can do. And then it takes a little bit of pressure off of relying completely on external circumstances to make you feel good.
Absolutely. I think of kind of sales as like playing basketball or sports, right? Professionally. You have no control every year, every quarter it changes. Uh, you can only control practicing and what you do. The everything else is all variables. And some years and months it's going to be great, and some years and seasons it's going to be horrible. Maybe the bad strategy or maybe bad timing, whatever. One thing I think a lot of sales reps or sales folks, especially folks in there that have gotten sales post COVID, I notice a lot of folks kind of focusing on like the quarter, the year, their next, like every SDR is like, when am I going to get promoted to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing? And, although that's like a really, obviously everyone should be aiming for moving up in their career. I think you mentioned like stepping back and looking at your sales career in a longer horizon. If you think about what can I do today or tomorrow that can help me become a VP of sales or a sales executive and win the long-term game, I guarantee you're going to be doing different actions, and it's going to go back into what can I do that I can control, not like having a good month, having a good quarter, working hard for that next promotion that may not come, whatever.
Yeah. And, I don't want to bury my head in the sand and say, oh, don't worry about your number this month. Like, of course you have to worry about your number this month. You want to get paid. You want to keep your job. I don't want to take away from that
Mhm.
at all. But I think just shifting your mindset to that longer term also helps a little bit with not feeling so much desperation, because as everyone talks about, like prospects can sense that, people can sense that in your deal cycles. If you are so desperate for this one thing because it's the only thing that you can control or that you have going for you right now, I think that has a negative impact on your sales cycle in general too. So yes, it's helpful to try not to hyper focus only on the current results and like burn future bridges because of that. But I understand, of course, we do have to be performing. It's just when you think a little bit more about the long term and the skills you're picking up and how you can continue to grow in your role, it takes a little bit of that immediate pressure off, at least in my experience.
Absolutely. How much time do you spend, or like, I guess like how much effort do you recommend or spend on like in self improvements on kind of the areas you can control?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the most important investments that you can make. I know a lot of us have really heavy workloads, so sometimes that requires prioritizing some time outside of work to focus on it. For me, the most impactful areas of self development I've had in this space have been obviously working to improve my actual sales skills. So that comes from a variety of sources, courses that I've purchased myself, podcasts like this one. There's a lot of amazing resources out there. But also kind of on the mental health and productivity and time management side of things as well. I think there's a lot to learn there that can help us be more effective in our day-to-day roles. So I'd say I always try and dedicate at least some time during my workday to improving my tactical sales skills in terms of what can I learn that can directly impact my pipeline, and how can I go ahead and put that into practice now instead of just consuming endless content and not actually using it. I'm a huge proponent for therapy. I know that's getting talked about a little bit more in this space, but even just in the sense of keeping your mind in its best working condition, I think that's super important. And then, yeah, just trying to learn more about yourself and how you work and not constantly being at war with yourself, if that makes sense. Like, if you can only focus in XYZ scenario, like sometimes I find myself focusing best in the little phone booth at the WeWork because it's like very small. I've got my noise canceling headphones on. There's nothing around me. So I know like if I need to get something important done to go sit in there for half an hour, that's going to be super helpful for me. And so learn yourself and your skills and what makes you tick and how you can actually be most productive, and then start implementing that in your day to day. And that's also going to have a really big impact. So like it's easy to be on LinkedIn and see somebody's routine and be like, oh, I should follow that, exactly, because they're a good salesperson. Well, if that doesn't work for you and the way you learn and the way you focus, then you're just going to be banging your head against a wall. So I think it's kind of that self-awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone's different, right? Like for me, the perfect morning is why I get get to spend some time with my kids and go to the gym and just exercise.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not a morning person, that might be the hardest thing in the world, and you're going to burn a lot of energy and mental energy and like stress getting to the gym in the morning. Do it your way. I always find like reading posts about social media, there's like that like cliche like a typical day of an entrepreneur starts at waking up at 2 a.m. and blah 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 blah. Like I think reading a lot of those things ends up putting maybe subconscious mental pressure on you. Like, hey, how come these folks can do all of these things? Well, if you're just starting off like your first 2, 3 years in your career, well, you shouldn't be able to do all that. That's hard. It takes you a while to work your way up to that, right? Like, uh, you just become an expert in certain things. So I like the fact that you're like, just build your own schedule. And I think there's this rat race of, I guess just in any profession or any role, but I think the real race is against yourself, right? Like using your time wisely. And if
100%.
you're racing yourself, is just like try to get a little bit better than yesterday.
That's another thing I'm
Um,
really sorry, just
Go ahead.
it's another thing I'm really passionate about because it's something that I've struggled so much with myself, is understanding that making little bits of progress each day actually does lead to something. I think a lot of people get caught in the trap of, oh, if I can't dedicate 2 hours a day to studying sales practices, and I shouldn't even bother because what's 5 minutes going to do? But if you spend 5 minutes each day and pick up a new tip that you implement into your sales cycle, and that improves your conversion rates by 3%, like that's going to have a massive impact. So I would say don't be afraid to even spend little bits of time to get closer towards your goals. Every little incremental bit of effort helps. And I find that too, obviously with prospecting, like call 5 more people a day, take you a few more minutes. May not have a massive impact, but it will add up over time. So that's another thing that I think more people should be focused on, just incremental improvements.
Absolutely. There's a good book by James Clear, Atomic Habits. And it reverses the like goal. Like, so I'll go back to like weight loss or fitness because it's an easy physical thing. You want to lose 20 pounds. Okay, great. That's a goal. What happens when you get there or get close to it? You usually don't get there or like you can't sustain it. Whereas if you make the habit, I just want to move 15 minutes a day, move like very vague, right? It's this like small incremental improvements to your life make a magnitude of difference at the very end. And then the fact that it's tiny, right? Like everybody here, anyone listening, watching, definitely has 5 minutes in their day somewhere. I don't care where, right? To do what you just described, like make an incremental improvement, like 2% better, 3% better conversion rate. That's a apply that times that by 365 times 5 years. That's a huge difference. Not everybody here has 2 hours a day to like take a sales training and whatever. I now argue like 5 minutes a day is easier than like 2 hours a month
Yeah.
because it's just so easy, right? Well, awesome. Sydney, thank you so much for your time. Super helpful. Where can people go to, continue on, and learning more about kind of this balance and happiness in life?
Yeah, so I share a lot on LinkedIn, just Sydney Senior, first name, last name. And I have a podcast with my co-host, Anthony Baniote. It's called Happily Ambitious. You can find that on Spotify. We interview a lot of salespeople in this space who share a lot more detail about some of the things that I was talking about. And yeah, so would love to connect with you on LinkedIn. Feel free to shoot me a message. Thank you for listening.
Awesome. And we'll link to all the stuff in the show notes.